Hey everyone, and welcome. Lately, we've got a lot of feedback asking how to come back from behind. I'm excited to announce that's exactly what we'll be teaching you in today's guide. After researching hundreds of replays submitted by our subscribers, we've isolated the 5 most important things you need to do in order to turn a loss into a win. We'll be learning these concepts from a replay of professional Korean jungler SKT T1 Clid in Challenger solo queue, so let's get into it. In this game, Clid is playing Lee Sin against Sejuani. He starts at his red, and after farming his Krugs and Raptors, he moves to counter gank top, where the enemy is able to kill his top laner, get Lee Sin's flash, and kill him as well. Not exactly the greatest start to the game, as he's now already behind. And this moves into our first tip: when you get set behind, look to focus the lanes with flash on cooldown. Now, that may seem obvious, but why is this especially important when you're behind? Well, the vast majority of the time when you get set behind, the enemy had to use their flashes to accomplish this. For example, if we look back to the losing fight top, we can see both Sejuani and Mordekaiser use their flash. With Mordekaiser having flash on cooldown, it makes him a prime target to gank. By looking to gank him before his flash comes back off cooldown, we will also be looking to turn that lane around before enough time has passed that Mordekaiser can use his lead to snowball further. So as Lee Sin respawns, he begins heading to his wolves. Hold on, why is he heading bot? Shouldn't he be ganking top? If we take a look top, we can see that the wave is in front of Mordekaiser's tower, but that it's pushing towards Camille's tower. We know this for 2 reasons. First, Mordekaiser has 1 extra caster minion. Second, because the minion wave is closest to Mordekaiser's turret, it means Mordekaiser's next minion wave will reinforce faster than the enemy minion wave, causing it to push more towards Camille. So pay attention to where Camille is on the map as Lee Sin farms his jungle. He takes wolves, blue, and then Gromp. By the time he finishes Gromp, Camille is now back in lane and Mordekaiser is pushed up, so he now moves to gank him following our first tip of focusing the lane without flash. This allows him to land a successful gank to help turn the top lane matchup around. This then transitions into the second rule to follow when playing from behind: focus on hitting your level 6 power spike. You see, when you're behind, it means that both the enemy jungler and the solo laners will hit level 6 before you, a huge power spike as they will have access to their ultimates. The difference between being level 5 to an enemy's level 6 is massive for this reason, but being level 6 to an enemy's level 7 is less significant as you'll both have ultimates at that point. Let's test your knowledge. After Lee Sin successfully ganks top, what should he do next? The answer is soak minion experience. Minion experience is so strong in the early game. By staying to push this wave with Camille, he soaked 6 caster minions, 4 melee minions, and a siege minion. When split with Camille, this is 327 experience for Lee Sin. That's the equivalent of 2 Gromps of experience. This is why he makes sure to stay and help push the minion wave with Camille to soak minion experience to help himself get back into the game. Once Lee Sin finishes recalling, he begins to head to his red buff. Again, he's going to focus on hitting that level 6 power spike before he tries to gank again, but he finds out it's been stolen, with the enemy Sejuani further pressuring him to give up his Raptors afterwards. Now, not only is Sejuani ahead of Lee Sin, but the enemy mid is pushed in the wave and is looking to collapse on us. So Lee Sin moves to his wolves, and after killing them, he's able to hit that important level 6 power spike. However, he spots Sejuani gank top, and this is where the third tip comes into action: play on the opposite side as the enemy jungler. Take a look at the minimap and tell me, what should Lee Sin do to help gain compensation for Sejuani ganking on the other side of the map? The answer is take the Infernal Dragon. Too often, junglers will try to counter gank when they're behind, following the enemy jungler around trying to protect their laners. There's no need to do this. Instead, when the enemy jungler applies pressure to one side of the map, this frees you up to pressure the opposite side. By following this simple rule, SKT T1 Clid was able to secure an Infernal Dragon despite being behind. And afterwards, he was able to lane gank the enemy bot lane with his level 6 power spike, using his ultimate to secure a kill that Karma would have otherwise been able to escape with her flash. Once Lee Sin is recalled, he heads top where a fight breaks out. Unfortunately, it goes horribly wrong, and Lee Sin and two of his other teammates die, putting them further behind again. But don't worry, it's important to keep your cool in situations like this, as he can still come back and win the game. As Lee Sin respawns, he hears that the enemy jungler has taken the Rift Herald. Again, we don't want to make the mistake of heading to the top side of the map, as that's where the enemy jungler currently is. We want to play on the opposite side of the map when we're behind, so Lee Sin heads to his wolves and hands off his blue to his mid laner. He then spots Sejuani placing the Rift Herald topside. What does he do as a response? Look to pressure the opposite side of the map by ganking bot lane. Unfortunately, the enemy bot lane plays safe, so he moves to steal the enemy's raptors in the meantime, resulting in him picking up a kill on the enemy Talon. As you can start to see, these 3 tips we just gave you are helping Lee Sin stay in the game despite being behind, but his team isn't in the lead yet, and turret plating will be falling soon at 14 minutes, marking the end of the laning phase and the beginning of the mid game. When you're behind, heading into the mid game, there's one golden rule to follow, which is also our 4th tip: play around number advantages. For example, after the fight mid, Lee Sin takes his red and then his Gromp, but afterwards he hovers around bot lane. If we look at the minimap, we can see that Mordekaiser is top, while Camille is roaming towards bot lane. This signals to him that he can have a potential fight with a number advantage. He waits for Camille and pulls the trigger on the gank, picking up a kill on the enemy Karma. However, shortly afterwards the enemy is able to pick up a return kill on Thresh. Now, even though it's 4 versus 4, Lee Sin is going to retreat and not make the mistake of fighting over this dragon. When behind, you don't want to take even-numbered fights, play defensive, and give things up if necessary, and look for opportunities where you have the number advantage. You can see how SKT T1 Clid will follow this exact philosophy as he leaves base and takes his Krugs. He then sees the enemy pressuring mid, so he moves to help defend it. Again, not looking to play aggressive, as Azir is in the top lane and Camille is in bot, so there's no number advantage for him. After this, he moves to take his blue, but the enemy begins collapsing on him. He's not going to make the mistake of trying to fight over this while Azir is in the top lane, he simply gives it up. He's playing safe and defensive, waiting for the enemy to make a mistake and give him a fight with a number advantage, and he will follow this philosophy for the rest of the mid game. If you want to learn more about creating number advantages, then I highly recommend you check out our recent guide titled Mid-Game Mastery: Creating Number Advantages, as we break it down in further detail there. Now, if these 4 tips don't put you back into the game, you have one last thing that can turn a loss into a win: stealing Baron. Some of you may be thinking that stealing Baron just comes down to luck, but this couldn't be further from the truth, as there are specific techniques you can use to guarantee Baron steals. As we jump back into the game, Lee Sin's bot lane gets caught, setting up the enemy team to take Baron. The first step to stealing Baron is to play it slow. There is no need to commit to any sort of play, you just want to check how much health the Baron has left. As you can see, SKT T1 Clid is scouting with Lee Sin's Q ability to see how fast the enemy is killing Baron and what health it's at. Then, Camille engages, but again, Lee Sin is not going to follow up. The Baron is at around 6.6k HP, not low enough for him to steal. He backs off after Camille dies, and again, is checking the Baron's health. Now at this point, there are 2 things you need to be aware of. First is checking how much damage you can do with your ability plus smite combo. You can do this by hovering your mouse over your ability icons. In this case, Lee Sin's smite combo will be the second portion of his Q timed with his smite. So if we hover over Lee Sin's Q, we can see it does up to 585 damage to Baron. We always want to round numbers to make it easier and faster to do these calculations on the fly, so in this case, we round it to 600. However, Baron has a lot of resistances that reduce the amount of damage our abilities do to it. Again, to speed up the process of calculating it on the fly, we simply cut our damage in half by 50%. So that 600 damage from the second portion of Lee Sin's Q now becomes 300 damage. We then add that to our smite's damage. If we hover over our smite icon, we can see it does 760 true damage. This totals to 1060 damage, which again, if you want to make it simpler for you, you can just round up to 1100 damage. By doing this important process, we now have a number to aim for. When the Baron is at 1100 health, we go in with our Q, timing our smite with the damage from it. And we can see Clid do just this. He throws his Q, but doesn't immediately take it as the Baron isn't at 1100 health yet. He waits, and as soon as the Baron hits 1100 health, he goes in, activating his smite right as the damage applies on the second portion of his Q, stealing the Baron from the enemy team. By following these 5 tips, Lee Sin was able to take the bottom inhibitor into then ending the game, turning a loss into a win. Alright, we went over a lot, so let's briefly recap. The first tip is to focus lanes with flash on cooldown. The reason why this applies to when you're behind is that in order for the enemy to get ahead, they usually had to put their flashes on cooldown in the first place. We saw SKT T1 Clid apply this to secure a pivotal kill in top lane to help his Camille get back into the game. The second tip is to hit your level 6 power spike. When you're behind, it means the enemy jungler and solo laners will hit level 6 before you. Ganking or fighting during this time is too risky since the enemy will have their ultimates available while you don't. We saw Lee Sin apply this concept by soaking minions after killing Mordekaiser top to help him to get to level 6 faster. He then moved to farm his camps, but his red was stolen and got pushed off his raptors. He moved to his wolves to hit level 6, which let him hit a powerful lane gank on the enemy bot lane that resulted in a kill he'd otherwise have missed if he didn't have his ultimate available. The third tip is to play on the opposite side of the enemy jungler. Too often, players try to counter gank the enemy jungler to help protect their laners when they're behind. Instead, when the enemy jungler shows himself on the map ganking a lane, it means the opposite side of the map is free for you to pressure. We saw SKT T1 Clid apply this concept by taking the Infernal Dragon when Sejuani ganked top. He then applied this concept again when Sejuani used the Rift Herald top by looking to gank bot into stealing the enemy's raptors and picking up a kill on Talon. The fourth tip is to play around number advantages. Lee Sin saw Camille was roaming bot while Mordekaiser was top, indicating he would have an upcoming number advantage fight. This resulted in them picking up a kill, but shortly after, the enemy got a return kill on Thresh. This made the fight over Dragon a 4 vs 4, so Clid simply backed away, avoiding the fight. And the last tip revolved around stealing Baron. You start by playing it slow and safe, waiting for the Baron to get low on health. You then calculate the damage of your smite combo, which is your damaging ability plus smite. Make sure to round numbers to make it easier for you to calculate on the fly. Also, make sure to cut your ability's damage in half to compensate for Baron's resistances. This resulted in Lee Sin knowing his smite combo was at 1100 health. He threw his Q and waited for Baron to get to this amount of health and then engaged, using his smite as his Q damage was applied, securing the smite steal. Alright, so what do you think of these 5 tips to come back from behind? Let us know in the comment section below, as well as any questions you might have. As always, good luck and have fun on Summoner's Rift.